Hello. Today we're going to do Goethe. I'm especially glad to do Goethe for Korean students because from everything I've seen, very little is known about him, and it's important. In doing him, first of all, I'll tell you about my relationship with Goethe. When I went to France just after graduating from college, I was on fire, and I learned French, and I taught myself some German. I was really interested, especially to read Goethe. Okay, then, and as an undergraduate, I had read Faust in translation. That's what really excited me so much. My hero as an undergraduate, I've said this before, took us through these great works, and so I knew about these great works in translation, many, but wanted to read them in the original. So, learned some, certainly enthusiastically. Returned, went to Duke, and in fact I remember I enrolled in certain courses, but I also enrolled as an auditor to learn German. But it was difficult to get to the class because it was held on the East Campus far away, and that ended quickly, though I kept up from time to time trying to learn. Then I completed my graduate studies, went to Italy to write my dissertation, spent 2.5 years in Italy, or 2 years. Wonderful, wonderful. And then, not having quite finished my dissertation, I discovered University of Maryland in Germany. Sorry, I'm repeating some of this, I'm sorry, but it's helpful here. And this was wonderful for me because this meant that I had a job in the first place. In the second place, lots of daytime free time because most of the courses were in the evening. And third, but really most important for me, I could learn German. So I plunged into German, and one must plunge into German. To learn German just casually is unthinkable. It'd be like learning Korean casually. I know about learning Korean casually. It's not worth much. Okay, so gradually, Goethe. Now, as a graduate student, I took a course, a one-semester course in Goethe, taught by a Swiss German who really knew a lot about Goethe. He was an expert on Goethe. Okay, notice spelling, G-O-E-T-H-E. Johann Wolfgang von Goethe. I'm going to tell you a little about his life, and then I'm going to talk a little about his lyric poetry, which is his crowning achievement, and tell you about Faust. Okay, he was born in Frankfurt. He's the glory of Frankfurt. His father I think, was mayor of Frankfurt, and so Frankfurt was a wealthy city, and so he enjoyed almost aristocratic status, almost, but he was upper middle class. Excellent education, especially from private tutors in the home, free reign to express this and this and this. He and his sister had a puppet theater, and he wrote plays for the theater. They put them on from the start. He is the essence, he is the best expression I know of. Picasso would be another, and Mozart, of whatever creativity means. That's what they are. That is, they spent their whole lives just gushing forth creations. Now, this is good, but one must be cautious a little bit. Was everything that Picasso made great? No. Interesting? Yes. Mozart too? Great? No. And certainly Goethe. His complete works, vast, 50 volumes. He lived a long life also. He lived to be almost 90, and he was creating all the way. In fact, he finished Faust just before, not long before he died. He spent maybe 30 to 40 years on Faust alone. Oh, no. Or Faust, he spent 50 years on Faust, going back to it, back. Okay. Remarkable man. Now, two things I want to discuss before beginning Faust. One, the lyric poems. Two, the German opinion of Goethe. And that's of tremendous importance. More than what other people say about their great poets. First, the lyric poetry. Arguably, he is the greatest lyric poet of the Western world. None is greater. He is, I think you can say, he is the greatest lyric poet in any language in the Western world. No one comes close. But part of the reason for that is Shakespeare didn't write lyric poems. He wrote his sonnets, and the Phoenix and the Turtle, and Venus and Adonis, and the Rape of Lucrece. But these are kind of narrative poems. No. Shakespeare really did not write much lyric poetry. To find it, you have to go to the plays. And yes, the songs put together, very impressive. But really, even Shakespeare's songs taken out of the plays do not come close to Goethe. Dante didn't write much. Vita Nuova, nothing compared with Goethe. Just to choose some great ones. And then one must go to other poets. Wordsworth, say, in English, and Wordsworth and Keats, say, and anyway, I won't go through that catalog in the various countries and their literature. Pushkin may be the Russian, but I don't read Russian, so I don't know. But I think maybe some people would say that Pushkin is a match, but I don't know. Anyway, he wrote a lot of it. And I have spent, how long? 30 years on and off reading Goethe's lyric poetry, lyric poems. For many years I needed and still need sometimes a dual language thing, but most of them I know pretty well from a volume that has been a cherished possession of mine, just Penguin, dual language, Goethe's lyric poetry. But it's good, and I have loved it. Okay, his lyric poetry, really, really remarkable. Now, the German opinion of Goethe is a problem. And I will add T.S. Eliot. T.S. Eliot's criticism, I guess I'm an expert on. I wrote a small book which was never published, my master's thesis at Duke on it. I know a lot about it. Eliot's treatment of Goethe was interesting, but I don't believe... Eliot lived in Germany briefly, 6 months, 8 months maybe, just before the outbreak of World War I. Then he had to leave. I don't think he knew German very well. He certainly didn't speak it, I suspect. But he had a scholar's knowledge of it. After all, he was a PhD in philosophy from Harvard. He had to know German. Read it anyway. So I wonder how conversant he was with it, but doesn't matter much. Anyway, in my thesis, I present Eliot's criticism in 3 periods. The first early one, when he valued wit. In that period, he could not value Goethe very highly. Goethe is a fun-loving, playful poet, and profound in many, and his playfulness is tied up with his profundity. But a person looking for wit, not much. Second, orthodoxy. Eliot's second period, when Eliot was a fanatical Church of England, Anglo-Catholic. That's not going to be the Goethe period. Third, wisdom. To his credit, Eliot came back twice in significant essays and speeches to Goethe in an effort to try to be fair, and as he did with many authors whom he had earlier derided or disparaged. And he wound up thinking, yes, Goethe, really great. Okay, people go through this with Goethe. The Germans, meanwhile, think that Goethe belongs in the company of Homer, of Shakespeare, and Dante. And I've spent a long time now, 30 years, more maybe, trying to deal with Goethe on and off, I admit. Okay, no, he doesn't belong in that class with those three, because he didn't produce a great long poem like they did, and Shakespeare's plays are long poems. That means there are problems for Faust. Now, the Germans, what do the Germans value? The Germans are so intellectually sophisticated. Everyone knows that. They, more than any other nationality, they have dominated philosophy, music, philosophy and music, theology too. Their intellectual ability is tremendous. And what the problem comes down to, I think, because I've read about this and I've read some people who have studied this. Erich Heller, a brilliant Czech German critic, brilliant especially about Germans, and Walter Kaufmann, who is a recent hero of mine. I'm going to show you a book that's dear to me, Critique of Religion and Philosophy. This man was professor of philosophy at Princeton for 30 years, long time. That's the best book he ever wrote, I think. But he also, that may not be true, I don't know, because he has written a lot on Nietzsche, and he is the expert on Nietzsche. Well, you can see where the Germans are. They have to deal with, not only with Goethe, who is a case apart, but Nietzsche. So difficult. And then a philosopher like Wittgenstein. Most people would say the greatest philosopher of the 20th century. Though most of those people are Germans, as Kaufmann says. Do other people... Oh, no, excuse me. No, that's not the point. Most of those people are Brits. The Brits loved Wittgenstein because there he was, this Österreicher, this Austrian, who settled in England at Cambridge. Kaufmann says, no, the Germans don't value him so highly, and the Europeans don't either. Sorry. Back to Goethe. The point is that these others, Kafka, Brecht, these other Germans, are so sophisticated. Thomas Mann. Goethe too. But Goethe is different from them in many ways. And they all admire this, and they all envy Goethe this. And it's his spirit of laughter. Now, I better explain a little more about Goethe, his life. For many years, Goethe is very diverse. He is the most diverse of all intellectuals, maybe. Maybe he embodies genius, he certainly embodies genius in some ways. Lyric poet genius, definitely. Now, Goethe spent many years being a scientist. And he wrote books on seeing. He wrote a theory of color, respected a little bit, but wrong-minded, of course. He should have known this, really, and he did know it, I guess, but he was just interested in these things. So he spent years as a kind of zoologist or paleontologist. That is, he spent months digging for bones and fossils and things in southern Italy and in Sicily, and he wrote a book about that. He discovered a small bone in human beings which no one else had ever identified. So this is not an amateur. This is a man who made himself into a serious scientist, and not just one science, but 5 or 6 sciences. He knew everything there was to know at certain times about 5 or 6 different sciences. Well, this is amazing. By the way, his dates. You need his dates. 1749, 1832. So he lived 50, 70, 89 years. I don't know. 1749, right? I'm pretty sure. So that's 51 and 32, 83 years, right? Such an active mind. No mind has been more active. And people who are interested in these things like to say that the 2 highest IQs in history, at least in the Western world, have been those of Plato and Goethe. I believe it. I can believe it. And maybe Goethe's is the highest. I mean, such an inquisitive mind. One would have to look at Leonardo. But Leonardo was not the creative genius that Goethe was. Leonardo embodies curiosity. He wanted to know, not just know about, but know to the bottom everything in the world. That's the kind of man Goethe was too. But Goethe had a bigger sense of humor probably about this, because he knew the impossibility of this. Goethe's ideas about religion are really interesting. He's hard to pin down, but there it is. There it is. There's the quality. He refused to be pinned down. Plato too. Refused to be pinned down. Why? Because really he knew that truth was unknowable and unfindable. And that irritates people who investigate him. And it has irritated me. I admire it now, and it's too late for me to do him total justice, I'm sure. I'm not going to spend years or even months rereading Goethe or... no, it's not. I can't do it. But, yeah, I should learn from him too. There's that smile, of the Goethean smile, let's say. His awareness that, of course, I'm making a statement, but I'm going to make the opposite statement soon. See if you can catch me. Why? Because, of course, in the end, statements even aren't very serious. Well, thank you, Dr. Shin, once again, for leading me here, because, I mean, I, of all people, I think, should appreciate this, and I haven't fully before. It has annoyed me. Maybe I have wronged Goethe. Very possible. Okay. He wrote many novels, some of them long. Wilhelm Meister, oh my God, 2 of them. Wilhelm Meister's Lehrjahre, apprenticeship, and on. Would I read those? No. Maybe they're better than I think, but I doubt it. Goethe in the history of German drama is very important. None more important. He wrote these poetic dramas that were published, that were presented, and still are presented. And some of them pretty great. Torquato Tasso, Götz von Berlichingen, on and on and on. Of course he did. His novels, some were very important. His first really big success, European success, was Werther. Werther really was very similar to Rousseau's, what's the name of that thing? Eloise. I don't know, and I read it too. And I read Werther. Young stuff, but it moved many people, very sentimental. Students of Goethe divide his work into these periods. One has to with such a long lifetime and so productive for 60 years. His early enthusiasms, especially the love poetry, great. And with that early novel. And then the students of Goethe who thus study his works have to study his various love affairs, because he had love affairs with many women through his life. He was such an enthusiastic, really charming lover. Just a man of these vast energies and vast enthusiasms, and always looking at himself and watching himself, and mostly with a smile. The young man didn't smile ironically much, but he learned pretty fast. And just this outpouring. Then Goethe the politician, because Goethe at a certain point, when he was still a young man, was invited by the Duke of Weimar. Weimar was a small country, duchy. This is, of course, long before Germany was united. But Weimar was important. Goethe became kind of the minister of culture and theatrical presentations, and on and on and on, was kept very busy for about 6 years when he was still young, 30 maybe, until finally, famous, suddenly he went to Italy. The Italienreise. Suddenly in 1786, I think, to 1788, he disappeared almost. Went to Italy just to enjoy himself, and he plunged into Italian life, and of course always producing poetry. Spent 2 years there, then returned, somewhat changed man, took up his duties again, but left them after a while. Remarkable, mysterious man in many ways, but everyone's mysterious. Everyone is mysterious, of course. But what a remarkable man. Okay, and so intelligent. Okay, I'm sorry, I'm not totally organized on this. I haven't lectured on Goethe for a long time. Okay. So, novels, plays, scientific works, lyric poetry above all. His lyric poetry, Die Westöstliche Divan, probably contains more of his great lyric poems than any other work, except maybe Faust. This he did when he was 60. Basically, it was a translation, adaptation from Hafiz, who was a Persian poet. Persian. How early? I'm not sure. 11th century, maybe. A great Persian poet, and apparently Persia produced many great poets. I mean, who knows? But that very sophisticated culture, wealthy and sophisticated and luxurious and elegant and intensely religious. Hafiz was one of these intensely religious but intensely symbolic lyric poet, and Goethe wrote adaptations to a lot of his poems. I mean, it's a fairly thick book, with commentaries even. What? And some of those poems I know, and they are really good, I think, in English. So the diversity of the man, the man embodies diversity. He is diversity incarnate. Inquisitiveness incarnate. An active intellect, seldom matched, Leonardo, but much more creative. Okay, sorry, but I'm sure I'm leaving some things out. A man of action, then, not just a study person, but spending his lifetime in a study or a library, but a man of action as a politician, a scientist, all that. Okay, Faust. The Ur-Faust, as the Germans call it, the first version of Faust that he actually touched, I seem to remember the date 1779. If so, he was 30 years old. Well, he died at 83, just finishing it. So for 53 years, on and off, Goethe played with this idea. Then Faust Part 1, because Faust is a long poem, poetic work, which is divided into two parts. Faust Part 1, das zweite Teil, the second part. Okay, Part 1 was published maybe in about 1790 and was very famous. Now, the story of Faust had been told many times even, most memorably to most people by Christopher Marlowe, contemporary, slightly older than Shakespeare, a kind of very important to Shakespeare. Marlowe died at 32, having presented 6 very good plays, and one of them, 3 of them even, very, very good. Arguably the best is Dr. Faustus. And Goethe knew this, of course, and took it over. The story came from Germany and has been traced back to the 15th or 16th century. And it was kind of told by traveling storytellers and people like that. Based on reality, maybe, to some degree. Roughly, the rough outline of Marlowe's play goes like this. Faust was a very learned physician scholar in Germany, at a German university. And he really did live. That man lived. In his boredom and in his quest for more and more knowledge, he dabbled in necromancy, the secret arts of contacting the spiritual world. And he was able to evoke, or he didn't evoke maybe, Satan in the form of Mephistopheles, a minor or a secondary, let's say an evil angel, let's call him, contacted Faust and said, what do you want? And Faust said, let's make a deal. He signs a contract whereby Mephistopheles will serve him for some period of time, the rest of his life, or 20 years or something. It's kind of unspecified. And in return, Mephistopheles will receive his soul, Faust's soul. Faust will be damned. By the way, there are famous operas about this. Gounod wrote a famous version of this, but French, as the Germans say of everything the French do, from the Germans, the French always distort it, trivialize it. But the Germans say this about everybody. The Germans say routinely about anyone who writes about Germans, oh, he doesn't understand. He misunderstood completely. It's an irritating aspect of the Germans. No matter what one says, he misunderstood it. He distorted it. He made it silly. How did he basically understand the basic fundamental truth? But when the Germans try to explain what that fundamental truth is, no, I'm sorry. They will invariably make it so abstruse, so complex, and so... That's the way the Germans are. I think many people would agree with that. All the Brits would agree. And the French too. Okay, back to the story. And so he's damned. At the very end, Marlowe tells the story really well, and it's full of famous poetry. Was this the face that launched 1,000 ships? And blah, 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 blah. Great. It's a great play. And then Marlowe died in 1592, just when Shakespeare was starting to develop into something special. It's one of those strange moments of literary history. Okay, Goethe takes this story over. Faust Part 1 tells the story, the following story. It's kind of a romantic work, and it's full of, it's a very, very good poem. Okay, Faust is the same man. He's bored, he's restless, but Goethe has this idea that the restlessness of Faust, in many ways, Faust Part 1 is Goethe. He denied it, but I think the later Goethe denied it. But it's difficult. Okay, he's restless, he knows everything. Everyone admires him, but in his restlessness, he summons, no, he does not summon. Mephistopheles comes to see him. They make their deal, but the terms of the contract are absolutely important. And at this point, Goethe, some people would say that Goethe is a Protestant dealing with what is really a Catholic myth. This could be argued. He certainly alters it into something a little more Protestant. He was raised Protestant, of course. What the terms of the contract are is, Faust says, Mephistopheles, your pleasures, the things that you can give me, will never satisfy me. My spirit, the human spirit, can never be satisfied. But the key lines, he says, are, if you can ever induce me to say, zum Augenblick, verweile doch, du bist so schön. If you can ever convince me to say to some moment, this moment is so wonderful that I want this moment to last eternally. That is, there's nothing more that I could possibly want. If you can induce me to say that, you win the bet, my soul is yours. The supposition here is that Goethe's spirit and man's spirit are insatiably restless, seeking, striving, aspiring, and can never be satisfied, insatiable. Mephistopheles kind of misses the point, because Mephistopheles is the cynic. Now, in fairness to Goethe, he said later that there's more of him in Mephistopheles than in Faust. And I believe it. Mephistopheles is witty, charming, cynical, has a kind of admirable side. He's the cynic. He's the analytical intelligence. And Goethe was that too, in fairness to Goethe. And I think I have never been totally fair in that way too. The person who assumes that Faust equals Goethe does Goethe an injustice, because Mephistopheles is a giant. And Mephistopheles makes a fool of Faust again and again. And Faust is not a very admirable man. Okay, they make the contract. And then what does he want? Well, the main drama that happens in Faust Part 1 is he wants to fall in love and experience love. He's never experienced it. And so basically he seduces a charming girl, a village charming girl, much below him socially, Gretchen, Margareta. Her name actually changes as we go along, as we become more familiar with her. She's a charming, innocent girl. Her father is dead, mother a widow. Lives a kind of middle-class village life. Faust sees her, must have her. So with the help of Mephistopheles, first they plant diamonds and jewelry boxes in her room. Oh my God, what's this? Now she has a friend named, what's her name? Doesn't matter much. I should remember, but anyway, an older woman whose husband went away on business years ago. Maybe dead, maybe not. She's kind of charming, and in a way Mephistopheles seduces her, or she seduces Mephistopheles. She's restless, she's down to earth, practical, and she advises Gretchen. Gradually, Faust charms her, and he really does love her. But his restlessness will not allow him to just be attached to her either. Well, what's going to happen to her? She becomes tormented by guilt. Okay, two big things that happen. We'll show you what's going on here. Gretchen says, "Oh, I want to." She's on fire for Faust as he for her. We're dealing with passions here, and the passions of this girl are ignited, and she wants to spend the night with him again and again. But what if Mom wakes up, because Mom is a light sleeper? Well, give her some of this little potion, and she'll sleep soundly. Mephistopheles at work here, of course. Well, the potion kills her. Mom is dead. And who gave her the potion? Gretchen. Who provided it, of course? Mephistopheles and Faust. Did Faust want to kill her? No. Did Mephistopheles know that she might die? I think so. This is a major, major thing. Of course, he denies it. But imagine the burden on her conscience. And so her love for him, passion, her guilt, produced this confusion. Then her older brother Valentine, a soldier, comes back to the village having heard a rumor about his sister having, as he would say, become a whore. That is, having lost her sexual innocence. He waits for Faust, finds her, finds him, challenges him to a duel. Mephistopheles says, pull out your little sword and I'll help you to parry the blows, to block the blows, don't worry. But then, of course, Mephistopheles at work blocks the blows and then says to Faust, thrust! Brother is dead. Brother is dead. 2 people dead on Faust's conscience. Is this serious? Yeah. What will the result be for her? He dies cursing her as a whore. Her psychological, emotional dissolution, disintegration now happens very fast. First of all, she is put in prison. Oh, wait, she has a baby by Faust. She kills the baby. She's now totally insane. She is insane. She kills the baby. She's put in prison. Faust, meanwhile, kind of there, but kind of not there. Faust feeling guilty, but does it destroy Faust? No. Does it even come near to destroying him? No. He has his Walpurgisnächte, his nights on when he's communing with the witches and the evil demons and all that. But he's very much in control of himself during this time. Faust's near lack of remorse, in the end she kills herself. She kills herself in prison, hopelessly insane, screaming his name. Serious business. Now this is romantic, very romantic, and the madness of Gretchen will be played again and again in other operas too, like Lucia, wonderful, wonderful Lucia di Lammermoor of Bellini. Madness. The romantics love these madness scenes, and the romantic poets love them because in madness one can make a character say all kinds of crazy things and just follow kind of the lyric flow of ideas or leaping around of ideas. Mad people talk like that. Romantic. Very romantic. But in the end of part 1, she is dead. And he feels remorse, in fairness, but it is far from destroying him. And soon his interests change completely. End of part 1. Now Goethe completed that, as I said, I think around 1790, and then said it, but that was it. Probably even then he had the idea of producing a part 2, because he had changed a lot. He was no longer romantic. That ended pretty fast. And he went into other, pursued science studies, pursued this and this and this, and then he got the idea to produce part 2. Now, part 2 is much longer than part 1, and part 1 is pretty long. Part 1 is at least 5,000 lines, I would say. Part 2 is at least 8,000 or 9,000 lines. I'm going to check. Oh, no, part 2. Yes, that's right. That's right. I have it right here. Excuse me. Got it. So part 1 is roughly 5,000 lines, and part 2 is roughly 8,000 lines. Yes, 7 at least. But part 2 is very disjointed. Part 1 is a drama, a closet drama, as it's usually called, meaning it's not really intended for the stage, though it has been adapted to the stage in opera and other things, of course. And originally Marlowe's was a drama, but you can see Marlowe had nothing about Gretchen, and the Gretchen chapter is the main thing that goes on in Goethe's Faust Part 1. Okay, part 2 contains 7,000 lines of poetry, some scenes, a kind of central drama, and the central drama is especially Faust's marriage to Helen of Troy, because he insists on seeing the great beauties of antiquity, and he sees Helen, and he must have her. So Mephistopheles must bring her back to life, and he kind of marries her. He kind of settles down in a medieval castle. Helen in a medieval castle? There are a lot of problems with part 2. I think one must say that the plot is contemptible. I mean, it's a piece of trash. The poetry, sometimes wonderful. But as a unified work, with a unified plot and direction and even dramatic power, it contains very little. Then Helen disappears, and then Faust decides, another of the main incidents, the final one, Faust decides that he wants to do some good. He wants to reclaim some land for Holland, basically. That is, build dikes, reclaim land, and turn a wasteland into a fructifying paradise. And so he sets to work on this, and he hires workers and all this. He can't do this with a magic wand. To do this, he must acquire those lands so that the workers can work on it. And one elderly couple, based on his history, Baucis and Philemon, they are an elderly couple, have this plot, a little relatively small plot of land, their home there, and they don't want to leave this. This is their home, and it's wonderful. They love it. They are relatively poor, but they refuse to sell to Faust. And this makes Faust angry. He must have that land. And so, Mephistopheles, get me that land, he says in an unguarded moment. Mephistopheles sends a couple of henchmen, and basically they cause the death of this elderly couple, and so Faust can have the land, but look at the price. So this event kind of corresponds to the Gretchen episode of part 1. Again, let's return to the central view, which Goethe did pretty much stick with throughout, his view of what man is. Man strives and strives. In striving, inevitably man errs. Man sins. Man does some terrible things, because in his striving spirit, of course he will. The alternative is to do nothing, and really this is not so different from Achilles' choice in the Iliad. He can settle into a quiet obscurity and live to a ripe old age, but that's not Achilles. He will be a warrior and strive, let's speak. This is not very close, but it's close enough, and die. And he will do things wrong too, Goethe would say, and maybe Homer would agree with that too. It's not Homer's focus at all. Goethe knew Homer well. Goethe knew Shakespeare pretty well. He was a scholar, and he knew everything. He knew just about everything there was to know during his lifetime. In fairness, that's true. Even going far afield to the Persian poets, his knowledge tremendous. His lyric poetry, his ability, his talent, his genius for it, tremendous. But in the end, Faust is turning blind. He's now a very old man. And Mephistopheles senses, aha, soon he will be mine. And at a certain unguarded moment, Faust seems to say, as the irrigation or the reclamation of land project was being completed, he seems to almost say, "Verweile doch, du bist so schön." The Augenblick, the perfect moment, is almost there, but technically he is imagining some future when it's complete and wonderful things have happened and all that. So Mephistopheles sweeps down, he thinks he has his soul, has Faust's soul. But a good angel also appears and says, no, these appeared in Marlowe under different circumstances. The agony of Marlowe's Faust, Dr. Faustus, hoping to be forgiven by God, but really a hardened sinner, pretty much. He can't repent. He simply can't. This is not Faust. Our Goethe's Faust never repents much about anything. He's always living life forward, aspiring, never settling into guilt or complacency or anything like that. That's Goethe, that's Germans, and maybe that's man to some degree. By the way, to give Goethe credit too, Goethe had his classical periods when he imitated the classics, and he wrote some good classical poetry too, and he knew poetry technically, metrically and all that, better than any poet ever has known, I think. In all Western languages, he knew virtually all Western languages, and was ready always to learn more and more and more. Just remarkable. A remarkable man. The problem is, with minutes left I can say this, the problem is, where's his masterpiece? Of which work can we say, this work is so great that it stands with the Iliad, the Odyssey, Hamlet even, or I would say Antony and Cleopatra, or certainly the Divine Comedy. And one cannot say, certainly one can't say of Faust that this is the work. It can't. One could say perhaps of all his lyric poetry collected, maybe, but in the end lyric poems are these short little things that as a genre really cannot stand with the giants. Okay, at the end of Faust, the ending is kind of embarrassing in my opinion. It's debated over and over again, and Goethe was his own greatest critic probably, but the spirit of play in everything he did. By the way, one of the most important works for students of Goethe is the Gespräche mit Eckermann, the conversations with Eckermann. Young Eckermann was Goethe's private secretary for about the last 12 or 15 years of Goethe's life, and his job was to record the conversations that he overheard, and every famous person living in Goethe's time came by Weimar, where Goethe lived. The two places associated with Goethe are Frankfurt, his youth and growing up, and Weimar, where he lived for 50 years. Everybody wanted to go to Weimar and talk with the great man. And so some very interesting conversations with other people, recorded by Eckermann, and then Eckermann himself asking Goethe questions, and Goethe talking. He was a master conversationalist, a very sophisticated man who could sit and talk with kings or popes or anybody. He was a giant. And as I said before, arguably the most intelligent man who has ever lived. And I can believe that. The problem, I suppose, is that lack of a Meisterwerk, a capolavoro, a chef-d'oeuvre, that work that can stand with those other works. The ending of Faust. Faust is dying. And then we get this, basically this very Catholic, he denied it, but I'm sorry, I mean all these Catholic figures, including even the Virgin Mary, and the soul of Gretchen, a little in disguise, she's not named explicitly, but obviously it's she. She's been saved. Faust is saved. Everybody's saved. Well, I used to be very disappointed by this, and now I can kind of accept it. But I think poetically, I mean, I can accept without the trappings of... it's very Catholic. The incense is burning, and the Catholic organ music is playing, and the angels, and the Virgin Mary is the best way to put it, is there to make sure Faust is saved. And Gretchen was saved too, and everybody's saved. Well, this idea has some merit, but not in Faust. Is he saved? Do we think he's saved? Well, he's not a very likable man. He's saved if Goethe's right, that striving and all that, blah, blah, blah. Did Goethe believe in God? Yeah, I think he did. But I think he thought what I now think. That has never occurred to me either. Wow, this is great for me. Did he believe in a Catholic or a Protestant God? No. A Christian God? No. No, no, no. Hell and heaven? Absolutely not. His own little theory about striving and all that, I'm not sure that he even believed that. No, I don't think he did. I think he believed in the unknowable of anything, the unknowability of anything. In fact, I'm sure he did. I'm sure that's exactly what he believed. People tried to put him in a box, and he refused to fit into that box, because all boxes are wrong. All boxes are distortions. All boxes in the end are folly. And I think Goethe would also agree that language is, if truth were knowable, language could not express it. He certainly believed that, and I think that's his ultimate belief. So this has been wonderful for me, because I realize for the first time that, at least where I am now, what a kindred soul Goethe was, and I take courage from this. It gives me courage to pursue what I'm doing on a smaller scale, I think, but maybe not so much smaller. We'll see, but wow. Anyway, great man, not a particularly lovable man, but a charming and supremely intelligent man. If one can measure and compare intelligence, or intellect and intelligence, this person and this person, again, no more intelligent person has ever lived. So, pretty great. I'm going to recite, I hope I can do this, God, it's been a while. I'm going to recite a famous Goethe poem and then try to analyze and explain it. I might make some errors, but I'll get through it, I think. Sagt es niemand, nur den Weisen, weil die Menge gleich verhöhnet. Das Lebendige will ich preisen, das nach Flammentod sich sehnet. In der Mitternächte Kühlung, die dich zeugte, wo du zeugtest, übernimmt dich fremde Fühlung, wenn die stille Kerze leuchtet. I've missed a stanza, but I'm going to go ahead. I have to. Keine Ferne mag dich schwierig, kommst geflogen und gebannt. Und, oh God, I don't know it as well as I thought I did. I need to look. Okay.
Ja.
Keine Ferne mag dich schwierig, kommst geflogen und gebannt. Und des Lichtes gierig bist du Schmetterling verbrannt. Und solang du das nicht hast, dieses stirb und werde, bist du nur ein trüber Gast auf der dunklen Erde. Okay. This is really a perfect expression, more perfect in the end than Faust, of what he's talking about. He says, translating, tell no one except enlightened people, because the crowd will scorn and scoff. The point is the endless striving of the human spirit, Faust, of which Faust is kind of an embodiment. Let's be fair to Goethe. Faust was just an embodiment of it, imperfect, I think. In the end, I wonder what Goethe really thought of what he had done there. I suspect he thought it was a failure, but he tended to accept and love his failures. Is that right or wrong? I'm not sure. Maybe that's right. Und zunächst des Lichts begierig, and finally, in love with light, you are Schmetterling, butterfly, verbrannt, you get burned up. That is, we seek light, we seek and strive and aspire. And in aspiring, in the end, it kills us. But that's our nature. And then the final stanza, und solange du das nicht hast, and so long as you do not have this, dieses, stirb und werde, this, and these are the key words, die and be reborn, die and become, werde. That is, so long as you do not have this restless, striving spirit, bist du nur ein tröger Gast auf der dunklen Erde. You are just a what shall we say, a boring and gloomy and not really alive spirit on the dark earth, auf der dunklen Erde. Sometime I'll revise this and get it straight, and we'll do the whole thing. But that's the essence. Stirb und werde. If you, if I, if we do not have this restless, striving spirit, then we're really dead already. And okay, for some people this embodies Protestant restless striving, and I guess there's some truth in that. Is he wrong? No. Who could say that? He seems to celebrate a little excessively, too romantic, too Protestant, some people would say at least, the striving and erring and everything is okay. But really, I guess, is that wrong? No, not wrong. The human restless spirit is either evil. It certainly is what we are. It's either evil or in the end acceptable to a God, assuming a personal God who watches our doings. I think Goethe evolved beyond that. I like to think to not that personal God, but that ultimate Brahman that I've discussed with you, of which the Christian God and all the other godlings are mere effigies, are mere superficial apparitions. I'm pretty sure that's where Goethe was. He was a Weltgeist. He was a world spirit.